Hi, this is Bob Scully, and welcome to another edition of The World Show, the Free Markets series. If it matters, measure it. Now, that's not friendly advice from your neighborhood tailor or carpenter. In fact, it's the mantra of one of the 20th and 21st century's most influential economic minds. Michael Walker, co-founder of the Fraser Institute, hammered this idea home ceaselessly, that the way to study the economy and evaluate it is to use reliable, replicable, and simple statistics. He developed the World Freedom Index with Rose and Milton Friedman, but he's also behind other initiatives that led, for instance, to Tax Freedom Day, or the National Debt Clock, or comparative college rankings. He's not the author of all of that, but his obsession with statistics was behind all those things, and we owe him a lot. Here is Michael Walker. Michael Walker, if it matters, measure it. Nothing is more important to you. Why?
Well, I think that the main purpose of the Fraser Institute and many such organizations is to get better public policy. And very often the only way in which to get better public policy is to provide people with measurements about how current policies are functioning. And there's also the fact that very often that when disputes arise amongst people about things, there are often values involved. And values are things which are very difficult to adjudicate. They're very difficult to sort out. But if you can have a set of facts that describe a situation, then you have sort of the stepping stones that might bridge a values gap between people, or an opinion gap between people, which otherwise you wouldn't be able to bridge. And as my friend Milton Friedman used to say, the basic reason for collecting statistics is to sort out arguments. And so if we measure the things that we think matter, and we measure them carefully and more carefully through time as we become more familiar with them, then we're going to get better agreement, and we're going to get better policy. And as a matter of fact, this hypothesis, as it was when we started, Milton and Rose and I started our project more than 25 years ago, was just a hypothesis. But now we can test that, and it turns out to be true. It turns out that as a matter of fact, policy is getting better around the world, and policy is getting more similar around the world. When you find new policy and you are able to show people that it works by showing them measurements, showing them that more economic freedom produces faster growth, produces happier people, produces less war, for example, less conflict. This has the effect of causing those policies to be emulated. But if you don't have the measurements, then it becomes a matter of opinion, and then you're into the to the kind of discussions that happen in pubs, where you don't have, if you didn't have Guinness Book of Records, just imagine how many more fights there would be in pubs.
Yeah, they'd last all night and nobody would change their minds. But you say good statistics make for happier people. I think they also make for happier media, because when you come out with these, like the Medicare waiting lists, or the college rankings or the teacher rankings that students do on their professors, boy, does that get play in the media. And they're like water bombs that you toss out into the public debate.
Well, certainly out of the Fraser Institute, I think our métier over the years has been to better encourage debate and discussion about public policy by measurement, and it's been very, very effective. School ratings, hospital waiting lists, as you've mentioned, and many other things, Tax Freedom Day, all of these things which quantify for ordinary people. And after all, I must tell you, some academics, they turn up their noses at this kind of thing because they say, well, it's not scientific enough. But the point is that in a democracy, it isn't the politicians, it isn't the political scientists who are going to make the decisions. It's the politicians, and it's the people, therefore, who are going to make the decisions. And so, if the people don't understand the issues, and they haven't been given the issues in a way that's tangible to them and understandable to them, then you can't have a meaningful democracy. You can't have a meaningful choice making of good policy by the people and for the people. And so it really is at the very core. Much of the work that we do is at the core of making a democracy possible in the real sense, making political policy choice making possible.
And it's been said, and I've seen this happen, that these statistics can enrage the teaching establishment or the hospital establishment. It makes them mad. Was that your intention?
Well, no. I mean, I think if you take, for example, the issue of measuring the performance of schools, when we started to do this, nobody in Canada was doing it, and we said, and by the way, we now do it in the U.S. as well to help some people in the U.S. And the intent was to inform the parents, because we felt that the only way in which meaningful change would come to the school system is if the customers of the schools were properly informed about the performance of the schools. Because if you have a poor functioning school where the principal tells the parents every year, well, we did as well as we could with what we had in terms of student intake. And then we come along with our report cards and we measure performance across 12 or 15 years of the school. We measure the socioeconomic characteristics of every student in the school, and then we present the results in that way. And we say, well, you know, here's a school that has exactly the same student profile as your school, except you're scoring a 5 and that school is scoring an 8.5 out of 10. So that then changes the whole discussion about what is the source of the problem, that it isn't the kids that are the problem, it isn't we can't really perform any better, as the one of the greatest critics of our school report card program is the dean of a school of education, where he's teaching teachers, and he said, well, you know, after all, the school can't do anything about you know, given where we take our students from, which is a preposterous, when you just think about it on the face of it, it's a preposterous kind of thing for an educator to say. But unfortunately, that is generally the reaction of it's the ethic, or it's the, what's the word? It's the zeitgeist that governs the education business at the moment. That the schools can't do anything. It's really all set in stone, and you know, and we're just managing something that as best we can. Whereas what our report cards show is that that principals and teachers can make a difference, that the way in which you organize curriculum can make a difference, and that students who come from impoverished backgrounds can be successful, can be at the top of the class when you look across all schools. And so it was not our intent to make people upset, but you know what? One of my favorite expressions is that the only human being that likes change is a wet baby. And if you come to any kind of an established order, whether it's a hospital system or whether it's a school system, where people have been used to getting the money in a package that says, here, go and provide this service in the best way that you can, where there's no connection between the consumer of the service and the quality of the service or the provision of the service. In other words, the money comes in a lump sum, the customers come in another flow, and there's no connection between the two, then you're going to have established practices that people won't want to change, but are crucial to change if you're going to get the kind of responsiveness that you would have if the consumers were actually paying. And so a report card, since we can't change the whole education system overnight, best we can do is to inform the customers of what it is they're getting for the money that's being spent. And I tell you, it has created a revolution in thinking about education.
Oh, definitely. But one thing I've noticed is that you get a sort of a rearguard counterattack with people trying to disprove your statistics with other statistics done an entirely different way. And they'll say, oh, no, that's not true of the schools. Look at this, and that. And then when it's countries being compared, they will do hocus pocus to the point where a lousy country is doing well and vice versa. So what do you do about bad statistics?
Well, I mean, first of all, usually it's the methodology that's at issue. And what we do is, in our case of our measuring schools, we look at the raw data, and we say, okay, here is what the raw data shows us. We don't adjust it for the socioeconomic characteristics of the kids. We don't say, okay, you're coming from low-income households, so therefore we would expect you not to do as well, and therefore we're going to load the dice so that low-income schools are marked up. In other words, we don't grade on a curve, on a socioeconomic curve, because what we say is that we want to give every child who enters the education system an equal break. We want to say, if you can do it, you shouldn't be told that because you're from this neighborhood or from that background that you can't do it. And so our methodology is not adjusted for socioeconomic characteristics. We could do that. We provide all the socioeconomic characteristics, and we do that so that we can take a school, for example, as I pointed out before, that has mostly English as a second language, for example, in the school. And we can compare that to other English as second language schools and see whether they all do badly, as is sometimes suggested by the teaching establishment. And of course, we don't find that. We find that there is various kinds of performance, and then the performance itself has to be explained. And so we use the data of socioeconomic conditions and so on to rebut arguments that say you can't do anything about it. It's important to get the methodology right, and the methodology in the case of measuring schools is that you should measure the raw performance and then try to explain it, not build the answer into your measurement. And that's what, which is what, of course, a lot of the critics try to do.
And I want to get now to the Economic Freedom of the World Index that you developed with the Friedmans. It's fascinating. In there, you measure the size of an economy, access to rule of law, access to proper credit, sound money, labor regulations, all the things that should be measured. Then you do a hit parade of countries, and you've got some surprises in there. For instance, in 2011, Hong Kong, which belongs to a communist country, does pretty well. It's on top, actually. Brazil, which is supposed to be very dynamic, is way down. So how did you get the idea for this index?
It basically came out of a discussion at an organization called the Optimism Society at Cambridge University in 1984, where we were debating the question about whether George Orwell was right. Paul Johnson, the historian, was arguing that Orwell had been completely wrong in his famous book 1984 because Big Brother was not evident, and so on and so on. And I took the point of view that, well, he was more right than wrong, because in economic freedom terms, we had certainly gone downhill since Orwell's day. And in fact, we were still then laboring under a lot of state-owned enterprise and high rates of tax and regulation and so on. Our marginal tax rates were still up in the high 80% and so on. And so I argued against Paul Johnson's position. And this led to a debate amongst the society. And we said, well, we have a debate here, but we have no way of solving the debate or of adjudicating the debate, because we don't have any good measurements of what I was talking about. We have some indicative measurements, but we don't have any comprehensive measurements. And out of that, we were able to persuade an organization called Liberty Fund to sponsor a series of symposia where we brought together the top political scientists, economists, philosophers, mathematicians, people from all across the globe to look at this question under the aegis of the Fraser Institute, and with Milton and Rose and myself guiding the process. And we basically, out of that, came up with both a better understanding of what economic freedom was, and also a better understanding of how to measure it, because we went through a number of false starts, things that wouldn't work, and we finally came up with, because of the wonderful work of two great economists, James Gwartney and Robert Lawson, who are producing the annual report now, the Economic Freedom of the World report. They, in their work, led us in a direction which proved to be the best way in which to go about measuring it.
And do investors go by this? I mean, there's some losers there. Some of them surprising. Like I said, Italy is way down. Brazil is way down. You wouldn't think that. India, you're less surprised. And of course, Canada, the US, Switzerland rank high. That's not a surprise. But do investors shy away from investing with your losers?
Well, I can't really speak for investors. I know that there's some uses because our work on economic freedom has sponsored other indices of the same kind, and I know that some of those indices are used by people in formulating some of their decisions. Some of the people associated with the Fraser Institute who are involved in international investing, both in industry and in real estate, have indicated they find it very helpful as a country, as a measurement of where the country stands and how safe it is to invest in the country from the point of view of the security of their capital. And so from that point of view, I can say that, yeah, it is used to some degree, but to what extent, I'm afraid I can't tell you. I do know that when we publish it every year, and we release it, by the way, now with 80 different institutes around the world who collaborate in this project. This is not just anymore our work, it's the work of this 80 institutes around the world in different countries. And when they, in their country, release the results, it gets a huge amount of attention. And I think that, we usually think about capital from the point of view of money going from us to somewhere else. But the very greatest problem that most countries face is not the failure of people outside the country to invest in the country. The main problem they face is the failure of their own citizens to keep their capital in the country. In fact, it's capital flight from badly performing regimes that's usually the problem. And our collaborators in these countries around the world have been, aggressively trying to demonstrate to their governments that their poor showing in this list of countries. And by the way, I must be quick to point out to you that our index is uniquely scientific in the sense that it is replicable. We don't put anything in here that is an opinion that we develop ourselves. It's all data developed by third-party organizations. And therefore, if a country that does badly, like Italy, for example, and we just had the international meeting of the organization, by the way, in Italy, but if the Italian government thinks, well, I'm getting a bad rap here, they can go through our 43 indicators and they can find out why they did badly. And they can say, well, I guess, I don't agree with that measurement, or I do agree with it, or whatever. But they don't have to say to themselves, well, the Fraser Institute or the compilers of this thing just had it in for Italy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but some of these countries must really want to send some hitmen to hit whoever works on this.
Well,
I mean, take China. China is used to getting nothing but praise from every quarter, and all of a sudden, boom, they dropped to number 92.
Well, no, but I must tell you, see, China, some of these developing countries, we have been quite active in. For example, we developed with the National Economic Research Institute in Beijing an index of the Chinese provinces, which, we do a North American index of the Canadian provinces, the U.S. states, and the Mexican states. We've done ones for Argentina, for a variety of federal jurisdictions. And so we knew that there would be a challenge in trying to present the ideas of economic freedom, particularly in the old days in China. So we worked with this group to construct what we called a marketization index of the Chinese provinces. And what that index showed was that there were parts of China that were very, very marketized. We couldn't use freedom because freedom, as we used to say to our authors, their freedom for you is a career-limiting word. and so what we did was we called it a marketization index. And the marketization index showed the government of China what its challenges were. Because in the places like Guangdong province, where they had, they had already special economic zones. They had already developed, they had Hong Kong there. They had a lot of the infrastructure where they had allowed freedom was developing quite nicely. But the western provinces, Inner Mongolia and so on, were in terrible shape, and so what this index showed them was all the work they had to do internally to sort things out. And by the way,
but they didn't try to stand in your way. They didn't cut you off from the statistics.
Well, no, but I must tell you, but some of these developing countries, we have been quite active in. For example, we developed with the National Economic Research Institute in Beijing an index of the Chinese provinces, which, we do a North American index of the Canadian provinces, the U.S. states, and the Mexican states. We've done ones for Argentina, for a variety of federal jurisdictions. And so we what this index showed them was all the work they had to do internally to sort things out. And by the way, No, because what? No, because we showed them. We were able to by using the provincial index, and because of the way we do things in a in a measured way, we were able to show them that if we took the population weighted index, that they agreed to it. By the way, we showed them our marketization index, and they said, yeah, well, we agree that Guangdong is an 8.5 out of 10. And we agree that Inner Mongolia is a 1.2 out of 10. Okay? So we took the population of all of the Chinese provinces, and we worked out a weighted average of the provincial index so that we came up with an overall weighting, an overall index for China, and it was almost bang on the number that we had them rated as in the Economic Freedom of the World Index.
And so one thing they must have been very proud of, if Hong Kong came number one, it means they kept their word. They did maintain a free system as they said they would.
Well, of course, what happened is not so much that China invaded Hong Kong invaded China. That's what happened. As you would predict, as indeed you would predict. I mean, freedom will out, People often say to me, well, how does freedom work anyway? I mean, why are free markets important? Well, you know instinctively why it's important, because if you think about life as being a continuum where, on the one hand, government makes your decisions, all the decisions, and on the other hand, individuals make all the decisions, the area where people make all the decisions, people are going to be happier, people are going to be getting on with things, whereas if you're told what you have to do, then you're not going to be as, you may do it, but you're going to do it reluctantly and so on. So it's no surprise that where you have more freedom, you have more of everything else.
But should we be pessimistic? Because the same report, 2011, says that freedom is actually regressing in the world. So what does that mean? Is it because of the crisis, or is it a general trend?
Well, there are two ways to measure that, and amongst our colleagues, we have a dispute, which is one about a taste about how you measure things. That line showing that there's been a retrenchment of economic freedom is one where you take all of the countries in the world and you simply add up the average rating, and you look at that over a period of time, irrespective of the population of the country. So, for example, when you look at Mauritius, who came 9th in 2011, a little island country off the coast of Africa, Mauritius gets the same weight in the index when you average it in that way as China does. Now, I prefer the
UN General Assembly.
Well, exactly, of course. So what I prefer to do when I'm doing these calculations, and it's probably reflecting the fact that I'm more of an optimist than a pessimist, I like to weight them by population. And when you weight them by population, the increase in economic freedom in India and in China alone compensates for a lot of the difficulties that have emerged in some of the countries, and there has been difficulty in the United States and to some degree in Canada, but less so. Certainly in Europe, there have been, let's say, unhelpful reactions to the problems related to the housing sector in the United States, many of which problems were engendered by well-meaning but very, very badly advised policy with regard to the housing sector. And now there's been an overreaction to that and a ramping up of regulations which are not going to solve the problem, because that's the problem was caused by deliberate actions trying to get everybody in the United States into their own home, irrespective of their income, whether they had a job, whether they had assets or whatever. And that was just a mistake. And now
you're an optimist about freedom will out, but how about the crisis? I mean, freedom will out, but will we, yes or no, get out of the crisis?
Oh, I think we undoubtedly will get out of the crisis. We're certainly not out of it yet. It involves the acknowledgement of the past, that we have to say the past is bygones and we have to get on with the future. The obvious issues are arising in countries like Greece. I mentioned before about democracy being in deficit. This is a very, very important issue, that if you are running big deficits, you don't have a democratic country in the sense that you have a representation by contribution to the society. You know, we always say no taxation without representation. Well, deficits are taxing a future generation to spend today, and that future generation has no say in what's happening. So we cannot tolerate.
But a brighter day will come.
Oh, I think there's no question that we will get beyond. We'll get beyond this as we would, but not without taking some hard lumps. I mean, the difficulty at the moment is the bailing out and the creation, therefore, of I think very bad incentives for the future of the current actions of the EU, for example. I think they should simply let the cards fold here and let them sort out their own issues internally. They should not be subsidizing an organization where of things where future taxpayers not able to vote are being saddled with the bill for these excesses.
Well, Michael Walker, if it matters, measure it. I'm sorry we're out of time. This has been fascinating and very instructive. Thank you so much.
Nice to talk to you.
Michael Walker was our guest this week on the Free Markets series of The World Show. And that's our program for this week. I'm Bob Scully. Thanks.